So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with RokoM and Michelle. And it has been a minute since we've been in the room together, and I'm so excited. I enjoy our chats.
Me too.
Oh, good. I was hoping you'd say that, because otherwise I'm just saying I enjoy our chats. Yeah, well, whatever. So this week's topic is on a subject that you brought up, but it's something that we were in the room with Margie and the 2-day A3 thinking class that we taught, that it's from that as well. And so I'm excited about it. So it's the power of ownership. I'm going to read a quote that 100% aligns to what we're talking about, and then get some thoughts and we'll come back. So responsibility equals accountability equals ownership. A sense of ownership is the most powerful weapon a team or organization can have. And it's so funny, when I read this, my brain responds to the word weapon, because I thought weapon is destruction, but it's like, it's a force, right, that we can have. And so when I first heard the topic, before we talked about the connection to A3 thinking and all that, it brought to mind for me developing ownership ability within our teams, or developing ownership ability at all levels of the organization, which requires us as leaders to let go of the ownership that we currently have, because we can't both own it at the same level. And I think that's where part of the challenge could be for leaders as we're on our development journey, is the whole idea of empowering people and developing that ownership, is we actually have to let go of it ourselves.
Yeah.
So what's on your brain?
Yeah. So my brain's exploding because I love this topic. There's a couple of things. So it started because we were developing the capabilities of leaders to develop others in their problem-solving capabilities. Leaders have, in a traditional organization, are the problem solvers, and in a lean organization, they are developing the capabilities of the people that report to them to be the problem solvers. And so it's a shifting of ownership. And in traditional organizations as well, the word accountability is often used, and it's often used as a means of policing or auditing or micromanaging. Those are some of the perceptions that folks have when they hear accountability. And so we started having this conversation around accountability really means having personal ownership of something. And being responsible around how you hold yourself accountable, or create an environment of accountability to that thing that you own. And one of the things that I love, and you and I went to a conference to hear him speak, was Edgar Schein, and he wrote a book on helping, and he talks about this idea of ownership. And the continuum basically that he lays out is, at one end of the spectrum, you have what he calls an expert. And those people are seen as the only people who can own and solve to that thing. So think about finance, right? If there is a problem with finances, you go and to that subject matter expert to get advice or to have them solve that problem. The issue with having an organization full of subject matter experts is that they are the rate limiting steps. You typically don't have a 1-to-1 ratio across the organization for those subject matter experts. They're usually 1% of the entire organization. And so they become a rate limiting step in change or in problem solving or improvement. The middle of the continuum that Schein talks about is this, what he called the doctor, not in the sense of a medical doctor, but similar in role, in that they diagnose what a problem might be, set the direction, that kind of thing. and they try and give ownership of the problem solving to the people who are doing the work, but they end up owning it because they were the ones that surfaced it and diagnosed it. And so again, they're a rate limiting step. They're not the right people to solve it because they're not doing the work. So that's where the pitfalls come with the doctor role. And then on the other side of the continuum is what he called the process consultants. And those are folks who are coaching others around problem solving. So they don't own the problem, but they are the partners who are going to ask questions, show up in a way that might challenge the problem owner's thinking. And that allows organizations to have, 10,000 plus or a 1-to-1 ratio of finder fixer of some problem with support to say, hey, am I doing complete thinking around that problem? And so it's then the leader, if they're in that role of process consultant, is not someone who is policing or auditing. They're stepping into that developer's role that you talked about, which is really, let me ask you questions that I might be curious about as to how you came to the thinking that you've just shared with me. And so then it really truly develops that sense of ownership and responsibility. I have to make sure that my thinking is complete and sound as I share it with others, so there's pride in what they're presenting.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm going to go back to, you've got me to the point where Margie was talking when she was teaching us, as Shook did with her on problem solving, is that we want to have problem solving happening, right? And the ownership stays there where the information is. The information is where the work's happening, okay? And so problem solving isn't just happening at the front line. So what you just described around subject matter expert to doctor to process consultant, right? Those roles that as leaders we could step into, because we could be the solver of the problems, right? Which we're showing an expert role, but we're not going to create the accountability, the ownership, the sense of moving it forward on the team. We're always going to have to be a catalyst to keep things moving forward, right? But that's going to happen at every level of the org, because I may be a director. At a director level, I'm going to be solving problems that are my problems to solve, not the front line, but they're my problems. So you're going to have this continuum that regardless of whatever level of leadership you're at, I think it's important to look and check and say, okay, where is the opportunity for me? Because there's going to be certain things that as a leader, you are going to own it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be your thing. It's your decision to make. And it's one of those things where frontline, I've had pushback before because there's this misconception that I don't know why the leaders making those decisions, aren't we the ones doing all the problem solving? So something got missed in translation. You're going to be solving problems at the level the organization is that involves your work, right? Where the information is. But there's going to be problems that are going to be solved by all levels of the organization because they're their problems to solve.
That's right.
So the only other thing that I'll add, right, because I want to pull in just another expert that's out there, Cy Wakeman, Cywakeman. She talked about, because I love this whole idea with accountability. She talked about a lot of organizations are going after just engagement, right? And she said, the problem is if you go after engagement without developing accountability, you end up with entitlement. And so what we're talking about in this ownership piece, right, is they're accountable people have ownership, like it went to responsibility equals accountability equals ownership, right?
Yes.
On the quote. Yes. And here's the beauty of it. Accountable people, owners, right, if you will, are freaking engaged. So you no longer have to work on the engagement piece of it because they own it.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. I wanted to pull Cy Wakeman into that.
I was smiling because I totally agree with it. This is one of the ones that we're probably not, far apart where we challenge each
No.
other in our thinking. This is one that we're very much aligned in our thinking. And, we talk a lot about lean, which came from Toyota, the Toyota production system. And I think this is where Toyota's principle around respect for people came from. Everybody has a role in the organization. Everybody has some expertise that they were hired for in the organization. That in and of itself creates some responsibility and ownership around that. So you have accountability to the organization to perform in that way. So there's that piece of it too, from an organizational structure and how you fit within the organization. And then, if you build onto that around improvement, what's your role around improvement, continuous improvement, or developing others? Like you said, it's at every level of the organization, you have a role. So at the front line, you may have ownership to problem solve around your standards of work. At a director level, I may have ownership around developing the team and creating the environment by which problem solving can happen, which will lead to us achieving our departmental goals. And then at a system level, a VP or a C-suite might own investing in the systems and the tools and the culture to allow for that problem-solving methodology happening within the organization, developing that culture and developing the people in this way, so that we are able to adapt to change and be sustainable in our performance reliably and so on. So it happens at every level, but like you said, everybody has a role around that.
Yeah. Where my brain went, well, you'll know in a minute, I'll tell you, I was thinking about, so how would you begin to develop ownership, right, with people? And I think one of the things, I had a conversation with a leader the other day, and they were talking about the performance goals. And so there was an ROI target, a dollar amount target that this team was going to be tasked with achieving. And the original thinking, and I went back to our team when, the team came together of others, the original thinking was, everyone's going to have a dollar amount. I'm just going to make it up right now. Okay. Everyone's got to identify $1 million each for this year and improvement or whatever it is. And so, my question to them, my observation to them was, I believed that you wanted to bring the team together, right, to align to where you can work as a team, more collaboration, yeah. And I said, so the goal that you've set there, basically is incentivizing people not to do that the way you structured it. What? And I said, because if I've got to get my goal first, right, I'm not going to even thinking about helping you get your goal if I've got to get my goal first. And not all things are equal, because you have different people across the team getting exposed to different things. So when I think about ownership, right, and how to get it, I think performance goals are super important. And my bias, okay, is to go toward a shared team goal, so that you remove that barrier of ownership, right? Because we're all in the collective together to be able to go after it. And then I'm more likely to partner with you on something that you're working on because it's for the whole team.
Yeah.
So that to me is one of the things that my brain goes to, is what could get in the way of that, or how do we start to develop or encourage it? And I think part of it is to think through all the stuff that could be in place that maybe doesn't reinforce it, that we need to take a look at and make some changes. So that's from my brain.
Yeah. And just to build on that, again, looking at span of control versus influence, looking at when you have multiple operators that might be contributing to that goal, understanding how that all connects and where there is opportunity and prioritizing those opportunities. So where do you start in the problem solving, right? To create that collaboration towards that goal. You know, when you asked about how do you stand up accountability, how do you create that accountability? For me, it is it's almost like a project, right? You have to first define it so that everybody understands what the term means. Talk about the roles around that accountability, and then the methodology for how you're going to demonstrate. And I'm being very intentional about not saying hold each other accountable, but how do you demonstrate accountability? Because if our definition is that responsibility and ownership, so how do I demonstrate ownership? And having that conversation about that. So what are your beliefs about ownership? And how to, you know, what are the actions that would tell somebody, yeah, that's ownership? Having those kind of social conversations first before you start building in the tools that might support accountability is how I would stand it up. Because I think there has to be that level setting and clarity around that before you can actually demonstrate it or stand it up.
Well, I think, and it's a good call out, right? So that we're not coming from a place of assuming a shared meaning, right? Because when I hear accountability, I have a vision, I have a definition. When somebody else does, it could be punitive, to your point. Accountability to me has got a negative connotation because I got hit over the head with it before, whatever it may be. And the word that came to mind for me was expectations, right? So we have to be really clear around what it is, what it isn't, what does it look like to be successful in it, right? And come to agreement, alignment, if you will, on what that looks like to move forward. So it doesn't feel like this daunting, heavy anchor that I just tied you down with to be able to do it, but it actually creates freedom. And I think that's where the ownership part comes in. So yeah, I love it. So this is a fun one. This is
there's so many little tentacles to talk about.
So and we're not going to go crazy with it, but this is a fun one that I think, to your point, we could come back to some other aspects of it. So I appreciate it. So what would you like people to take away from today?
I'd like people to take away that the power in ownership is personalizing it, understanding your role and how you demonstrate ownership so that it translates into demonstrating accountability and responsibility towards that thing.
Yes. And the thing that came to mind for me was, as a leader, right? Because my brain went to how do you do this with a team, right? Because that's where the power is when it's one. And I love your idea that let's get together and talk about it. Let's get together and talk about it as a team, so that what we're developing around this whole idea of ownership, which is exciting and it gives people freedom, right? Is that messaging is part of it, so that, as Margie would say, they get their fingerprints on the thinking, so that it doesn't feel like, as well-intentioned as you may be, it doesn't feel like a top-down initiative, because you got the team coming together. And when they come together to identify what it looks like for the team, they start to become owners. And so I think that's the thing that comes to mind for me is I caution people on baking things out too far before they start engaging others, because others can't see themselves in where they fit in. and where
Yeah.
they might make a contribution. So
Yeah.
I think that's it for me, is engage with the team and get their thinking on the thinking, their fingerprints on the thinking. So
Yeah.
that's it. So fun topic. Thank you. So
Yes.
this has been Leadership Soundbites with RokoM and Michelle on the power of ownership. Please like, share, let me say that again. Please like, share, subscribe so I don't run through those things, and we'll chat next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.